Okay, Tony, thanks for that. Well, of course, we were outside of the courthouse all day today. Very few people were allowed inside, and fewer people were allowed inside the courtroom. One of those people, our own Willard Shepard, an analyst now for NBC6. You were actually inside the courtroom. Can you set the scene for us?
Well, first of all, Mr. Trump, from where I was sitting, was 7 or 8 feet in front of me. There was a row of Secret Service agents, and then another row where one Secret Service agent was sitting in that particular spot. When we were taken into the courtroom, the former president was already seated between and flanked by his 2 attorneys. He did not speak, as Tony Pipitone was saying. He didn't speak at all during this 47-minute process or so. All of the entries needed to be made concerning his not guilty plea, the things along the lines of any hearing like this, first appearance after that not guilty plea. Also, when they got into did he want a jury trial? He certainly said yes, he wanted a jury trial. His attorney did. Also, the discovery process, that process will begin. And Jackie, in this particular case, it's different than in other cases because of the classification, the kinds of documents, the kinds of things that will be presented during this trial. That'll be a big part of this going down the road, because obviously this is no ordinary types of charges, and there was a special set of rules that will be applied here as to what jurors will see, what will be shared with the attorneys, and there's a balancing act in that as this goes forward. But all pretty much routine today as to what happens here in the court anytime down here in federal court. Just obviously a historic event because of this particular defendant.
He, of course, had his attorneys with him, and just yesterday they were looking for local representation. That Florida counsel was with him as well in the courtroom?
Yes, he was there, and also in legal terms, his other lawyer was granted what we call pro hac vici. That means you're licensed to practice in another state, you're coming here for a specific matter, and the court takes a look at your credentials and says, yes, you can go ahead and move forward. One other attorney in the court that Mr. Trump did not turn to, we did not see him look at all, was the person who in essence put him here, and that is the special counsel Jack Smith. Mr. Smith was located about 10 or 15 feet on the other side of the courtroom from Mr. Trump, and from appearances section, 7 or 8 attorneys with him from his office. Of course, he's the one who investigated this, moved forward with it, and when it got here to the Southern District of Florida today, from an administrative point of view, attorneys from the Southern District of Florida actually did the communication with the court. Because Mr. Smith was right there. We did not see, we've heard what the former president had to say about Mr. Smith, but we obviously did not see any interaction between the 2 of them.
Can you describe the demeanor of Mr. Trump and of Mr. Smith?
Mr. Smith was, looking forward. He was sitting behind the U.S. Attorney representatives here, and Mr. Trump looked straight forward the entire time. The only image we got of his demeanor was when we got up to leave, and he walked right in front of us. Obviously, no one wants to be indicted in any fashion, but certainly not in this particular fashion. And he didn't appear to me to be, reveling as we saw him later over at Versailles, because his process had just ended, and he was actually being escorted out of the court by the U.S. Marshals, who did an amazing job here today, and also the Secret Service, to go back to their protection detail.
We have many more questions, so stick around. We'll get back to you a little later on. An incredible perspective. Willard, thank you so much. That's right. We are back with this historic indictment of a former president. Many people have already left right here behind me, but there's still a lot of press in full force still here in front of the federal courthouse here in Miami. The 45th president of the United States of America was at the federal courthouse right here behind me. He appeared before a magistrate and pled not guilty through his attorneys. Inside that courtroom, very few people. But one of those people, NBC6 analyst Willard Shepard, who joins us now, so he can give us a feel of what was happening inside the court. And you said earlier that everything pretty much went as planned. The demeanor of the president, the demeanor of Jack Smith that was also there. What can you tell us about the witness list? Because many people weren't expecting that part of the procedure to take so long.
Yes, about 47 minutes we were in there, and 40 minutes of that was a back and forth between the judge, Mr. Trump's lawyers, and also the prosecutors about who Mr. Trump can have contact with as this process goes forward. The very simple things, Jackie, that were taken care of was the not guilty plea, the beginning of the discovery process, and also asking for a jury trial. But when it came to this area about who Mr. Trump can have contact with, the government has a lot of concern about Mr. Trump and his attorneys. As a matter of fact, there's an attorney, Mr. Cochran, in this case, who's one of the key players in this case, who says, I didn't know where some of these boxes were, and I actually had another lawyer certify that all of this had been turned over to the FBI. The problem that Mr. Trump's lawyers say with this is many of these people have worked for him for years, had contact with him on a consistent basis, and they have to try to work out some type of arrangement where the government feels secure that communications that should not be happening are taking place, but Mr. Trump can still go on with his life, be able to have these people work for him in some capacity. And that took up the huge chunk of the time we were in the courtroom.
So let's talk about discovery, because I imagine that's going to be difficult as the next step in this process.
Yeah, very much so. Just think about why we're here. We're here because there's an allegation of basically the United States secrets being in places that they shouldn't and being shared with people that they shouldn't. And when you look at the indictment is very, very careful in terms of not giving any specifics or details about the contents of these documents. We know some are marked confidential. We know some are marked secret. We know some are marked even higher, top secret, but we don't have any information about what the contents of the documents are. And in this special process in the federal court system, the judges and the attorneys going forward will need to decide how much of this are we going to share. If you share all of it, as I've heard some analysts say, hey, well then Mr. Trump's people could say, well, it must not be that devastating to the country. We let the jurors see it, and they don't have any security clearances. But then on the other hand of that, the prosecutors need to be able to present some of this information to be able to give the jury and the court an idea of what these ramifications are and why Mr. Trump was indicted in the first place.
A big avenue of communication for the former president, his communication with the people, has been through social media. And the magistrate did not disallow that interaction on social media by the former president, right?
That's correct. When we were sitting there and he said, well, I think that there's going to be some additional conditions because he allowed Mr. Trump to keep his passport, he allowed him to travel. The government didn't have any problem with that, but we all know the history of what some other courts have said in the Northeast about trying to limit Mr. Trump's activity, on his social media platforms and in other places. I expected that to come next, but it did not. It was the addressing of who Mr. Trump can actually have contact with and conversations with. There was no inkling of anything about what he can say, not say about what this trial is all about or what he thinks about the judge or the Southern District of Florida and all of those types of things. And again, Jackie, none of us knew whether he was going to actually be here, but all of this took place in front of the special prosecutor who brought this case in the first place.
Jack Smith, and you were right there in the middle of it.
We were right there to see it all.
Thank you as always for giving us that perspective as an attorney as well.
Okay, thank you.
Willard.
Great to be with you.
You too.